Hey, this is Gabriot here with another Monster Train Covenant 25 expert guide. As always, my guides are geared toward Covenant 25 level play, but they're applicable to any Covenant level. You're just going to have a little more leeway on the lower Covenant levels. So for those of you looking to climb and you want to do it with the Melting Remnant, this could be a viable strategy for you. So today's video is going to be specifically for the Little Fade Firelight variant. I'm not going to bother. A lot of times in my guides I kind of give I have my primary path for a particular strategy, but I give kind of what to do if you don't get the desired path. I'm actually not going to do that in this video because the gameplay for Firelight version of Little Fade is so vastly different than the other two versions of Little Fade that it just wouldn't make sense to try to pack all of that into one video. And to be honest, I'm significantly better with the Firelight version, so I'm just kind of not ready to give a guide on the other two versions of Little Fade yet. So this is geared only if you happen to see Firelight offered at the start. If not, you're kind of on your own. But anyway, and I'm specifically saying blue purple, aka Melting Remnant, and secondary of Stygian. So I'm going to start with a little bit different thing here in the beginning. I'm just going to give you a little preview of kind of what this deck looks like in practice. So here we go. This first example here, we got kind of a typical setup where we got a tank, we're using Stygian in this case, the Siren of the Sea. And then we got our DPS in the back. Usually you're only going to have one, but in this case we had the micro pip upgrade, so why not Hellvent it, right? So pretty easy there. This next one, this is a less typical setup. In this case I'm using Cold Kalia as a hybrid DPS and tank. Usually I'd like to have one DPS and one tank, but in this one, with all the damage that we had, we didn't really need a dedicated tank just because there was so much damage coming in. And in this one, this is a pretty standard setup, I'd say. Lady of the Reformer is probably the prime tank in this strategy. And either sweeper, in this case the spell damage sweeper, is going to be probably your prime DPS unit, and then a draft is a prime utility unit. So pretty much just a prime setup right here. This is probably a 8th battle that really had nothing. Now this is a little bit different. Here's one where I made a few mistakes, but the power of the strategy kind of allowed me to still make it work. Offering Monument is insanely good with this combo. On top of just being a good card in general, the fact that it just keeps getting health back and you can keep playing it is just pretty awesome. So I have a good sweeper here. I would say Paraffin, I should probably have not stuck Multi-Strike on him. That's where a lot of the difficulty in this run came in. It was tempting to put Multi-Strike on Paraffin just because it's so nice on him, but I really needed to just focus on the fact that he's my tank, and I should have just done the boring upgrade and just done an additional 25 health. That would have made this run a lot easier. But as you can see, there's a little bit of flexibility here. We're able to at least start reforming at least some of this floor. Can't really afford in this strategy to really take the whole floor with you, but we're at least taking Paraffin along with the Offering Monument, which actually has a lot of damage, you can see here. And this will be just enough to finish him off. Kind of a hilarious totem kill there. And then this final one here, pretty standard setup again. I guess this is not the final one, but this is pretty much just showing that this was like the most bread and butter version I could see. And then this final one here, we're using the Guard of the Unnamed as a tank here. Decent tank. I prefer Lady of the House, or the Reformed or whatever, but this is fine. And also I'm just showing here that you can, if you have the extra space, you might as well use it. So right at the end here, we transformed some of these tomb units that we've been using as utility just to add some extra DPS, since the stats that you get from Firelight are just so great. And yeah, just another easy full pyre health win. And that's a little preview. So Firelight. Your game plan here, you're going to build that super floor. You'll notice we really had no multi-floor setups there. everything always focuses around that one floor where you're just going to keep stacking burnout and stacking all those stats. And as I said, you want that bread and butter one tank DPS as kind of your baseline. And then there's options from there. You know, you can add some drafts, you can add totems, you can even add, like we did at the end there, some tomb units. So a little bit of flexibility there, but try to get that one tank, try to get them some health or armor upgrades, and then get that DPS unit. Ideally a sweeper, but a lot of things can work as DPS. Now on this other side, we, early game can be a struggle. You're working with random reform most of the time early on before you can find a Molded or Wicked Blaze or a Endless Tome. And you may not find that till way late game or at all. At any rate, with random reform, you got to keep your reform pool empty. So, especially once you start ironing out the game plan to take on that first big boss like Daedalus or Talos, you really want to know which units. Usually you don't want to play any stewards. Like normally with other strategies, you're kind of putting stewards down here and there to kind of get them out of the deck. But in this, you can't really do that because if you're not guaranteeing Little Fade to reform constantly, that's going to screw you over. And on that note too, you aggressively want to purge those trained stewards out of the deck. Like I usually try to purge at least one at my first shop, pretty much no questions asked. 2 if I have the extra gold. I usually am not re-rolling at my first shop in this strategy, which is rare for me if you've known my other strategies. But you really want to get those trained stewards removed. Otherwise, they're just burning a hole in your deck, literally like drawn a dead weight, pretty much. And on that note, if you see any Burnout Extension or Reform, you want to grab that ASAP. Both are going to be essential. Reform is going to allow you to keep bringing Fade back in. But you also want some Burnout Extension because you're probably not reforming Little Fade enough to really get much burnout going in the early game. So any sort of Burnout Extension is going to be huge. I'm kind of touching over on what I just talked about there, but just kind of writing it out here. So, if you've seen my other Melting Remnant strategy guide on Rector, it's different now. So Rector, you could get away with playing stewards and whatnot because if you started Burnout Rector, you probably had some Burnout Extension and some or some reform. But all you had to really do is hit on one of them, and you would win those first like 2 to 3 rings, right? All you had to do is reform him once or slap one Burnout Extension on him, and he's probably just going to carry that early game. That's just can't happen here. You have to reform several times because it only gives 2 burnout on each extinguish, and if everything burns out, then your pool is convoluted now. Like you're probably looking at maybe a 1/3 to a 1/4 chance that you even can reform Little Fade. And that's pretty much a losing scenario. You had to get lucky there to win, and the luck is not in your favor in that type of situation. And honestly, you probably you'll have to consider trials. Like I usually take the first one, and the second one, it really depends on my Pyre HP, but you're often having to sacrifice Pyre HP in favor of just not getting like some damage in. Like usually you can put some stewards down in most strategies just to get that 5 damage here and there. If not to kill the enemy, to at least get them down so that you don't take an extra hit from the Pyre. But in this strategy, you can't really be doing that. Especially if it means those stewards are going to later die and then get shifted into your reform pool. So just think some things you really need to keep in mind. And as I said before, you really need to purge stewards ASAP. Drive that home. Like it's the most aggressive I've ever had to be with purging stewards, this strategy. Then I have one little more montage here where we're just going to go over some early game things. So I took the armor trail in this case. So I have a choice here. I see I have the Whiplash, so I don't really want to give this guy a damage shield. You still want to like prevent pyre health if you can, so I figure I can just do this and hopefully draw into a Train Steward. And I can put the Train Steward in the front in this case, because it is only 3 damage. I'm going to earn that back just from the Extinguish here. And then I don't give the guy a damage shield, and I get that 14 damage in. And then the Burnout will naturally just extinguish my person without giving them a damage shield. So now the health there, all I need to do is put 1 damage on that top unit to prevent a second hit to the pyre, and I'm probably gonna end up doing that here. I do want to trigger the Extinguish, but I still don't want to give that that damage shield. Luckily, since I'm now reformed, I got the 6 health, so the second unit's gonna be the one that kills it. And so yeah, I just only take 1 hit there. Now we have a choice. We could let these top people through and try to just focus on the boss, but I basically made the call that I think I can take them all out and still beat this boss, so that's what I'm going to go for, because I do have the nice Burnout Extension on these 2 heavily statted stewards. Like, even right now I'm almost killing them, but just a simple reform is all I had to hit there to win. And then might as well stack that Subsounding Blade. Subsounding Blade's going to be just an all-around useful spell. On this one we're taking Mark of Invasion. I have some choices here. I figure I'll go to the top here and just start extending out these Train Stewards. That way I also prevent the most pyre damage from those early units that'll still have some rage when they hit that pyre. But now we really have to keep these 2 stewards alive as much as possible, along with not playing any additional stewards. Now right there could be an argument that maybe I should have played that Hallowed Drippings before I put Little Fade down. That way I would have been able to just let her burn out. That's probably was the better play, but it saved a little bit of damage in my Steward, so that's one thing to consider. And I might have so much burnout right now that it doesn't matter too much. I might have just wanted to save the damage on that Steward. But anyway, now we got the same type of decision. It's like I could put the Little Fade down, because I'm guaranteed the Reformer right now because I've kept the pool clean. We're not having any pyre damage at the moment, so I don't need to really put anything in there. So I do think here I'm going to just extend everything, because it looks like that alone should be enough to take him out. And this also gives me flexibility now. Now I can actually play Stewards. I would have still rather got 2 Frostbites on the boss there. That's why I played the Frostbite card first. But now that I know that my extension is full, or my pip space is full on the top, and the burnout's extended enough that I don't need to reform anymore. So now I'm free to just play out some Stewards, just get some extra damage in there. So that's kind of what's going on there. And this should be no problem to finish off this boss. Only took a minimal amount of damage to the pyre. I'd say that's pretty common for the Mark of Invasion. It's one of the better invasions, I'd say, or trials. And that's pretty much it there. So now let's get into the card picks. Tank units. Probably the first thing I look to add into my deck is the tanks. Those are going to be the big things that allow you to take on that first boss, Talos or Daedalus. Nothing, I would say nothing in general can beat Lady of the Reformed. She's great at pretty much all stages of the game. The only thing she's not going to give you is any damage, but she does give you damage in the form of, just keeping all your DPS units alive. That every unit behind her is going to be a DPS unit, even if they're like a totem or something at that point, just because they're going to get all those stats, and you don't actually need any Burnout Extension if you just have Lady of the Reformed. Like, she just keeps, you're most likely only going to take 1 hit with your Little Fade, maybe 2, but all the other hits are still hitting Lady of the Reformed, and those are all extending your burnout. So just a really good card. It has good tank stats, 40 health is pretty hard to beat. 2 pip space, 1 energy, just everything's good about Lady of the Reformed. The other 2 top tier tanks, maybe on a slightly less tier than Lady of the Reformed, are going to be Siren of the Sea and Wickless Baron. They don't start with the nice health, but most likely you're going to be upgrading that health anyway, and then the health just continues to scale. Wickless Baron, I would say I generally prefer Siren of the Sea, but Wickless Baron, if you do happen to have some tomb units, probably is better than Siren of the Sea. Without the tomb units, you're not really triggering much friendly harvests other than the little fade typically, but you're still probably cleaning up the enemy line, and that's going to be a lot of harvest procs. So both Siren of the Sea and Wickless Baron give a nice you should focus on them as tanks if you're specifically making them your tank unit, but it is nice that they also scale some damage along with being a tank. That can just help with clearing out floors early and scaling early. And then also these are all decent. Paraffin Enforcer, like I said before, it's tempting to put multi-strike on him, but I think if he is serving as your tank, you should probably not put multi-strike on him, as tempting as it is. Usually the best situation for Paraffin tank is if you're running drafts, particularly if you have 2 drafts and a DPS unit even, but in that case, you don't need the 2 strikes. You can just stack him with health. His health isn't great for a tank, but it's not horrible. If you can put 225 damage or 225 health upgrades on him, he's pretty decent because he'll keep scaling off the extinguishes, and then the amount of damage he adds to the drafts means that he doesn't actually end up needing as much health, right? Lady of the House, it's a boring unit, but especially early game, she can be nice because when you pick her, it's she can really fit either role, right? A lot of these units kind of fall into that, but Lady of the House especially, it's her stats are just really good, right? Doesn't need as much burnout extinguishes or extension to really shine. You're pretty safe taking Lady of the House early on. The only thing I'll say about Lady of the House is late game doesn't really have any edge over anything else listed here, other than I guess Wickless Tycoon. But and then Guard of the Unnamed, similar to Siren of the Sea, actually, technically has better defensive scaling. The only reason I would say I don't really prefer Guard compared to a Siren of the Sea or even a Wickless is the fact that offense isn't going to naturally scale. I mean, it'll still scale as everything scales from Little Fade, but it does mean some early units might get by that otherwise wouldn't have. But still a pretty good unit. It'll get, as long as you're incanting a lot, the amount of health this thing ends up getting is pretty high. And then Titan Sentry is always going to be a good unit in any strategy. I would say it doesn't particularly shine in this one, especially if your backliner is already a sweeper unit. It's really unnecessary to have Titan Sentry, but if you don't, it does provide some nice AoE to clean up that backline, and the stats are not bad. The only thing I'll say is, it doesn't have any offensive scaling similar to Guard of the Unnamed, other than, the Frostbite, but typically you're just not getting hit that much, as much as a normal Titan Sentry would, 1 to 2 to even 3 sometimes less hits than normal. But all that being said, it's still just a great unit. Slap some health on it, slap some armor and cants on it, either one's going to be fine. And then Wickless kind of barely makes the list. He has that 25 health, which is okay, but not great. It's not really there for fighting. It's more of an early game. I would say usually with Wickless, I'm looking to transition out of him by late game if I can. But if you need an early game tank and there's not really any better options, Wickless Tycoon can work. And it gives you that nice... The nice thing about Wickless Tycoon is you can get a lot of gold with him. And that gold can later allow you to be a little more aggressive with the things you do at shops. So that's kind of the Wickless Tycoon story. And that's pretty much it. All those fails, you could just find any unit and slap health upgrades or armor and cant upgrades, and they'll probably work as a tank as well. Now we're onto the DPS unit, the other important part of this. It became apparent pretty quickly that just these sweeper units are the best. They're on a whole different level even than these great units. The amount of just damage scaling you get, all you need is one Extinguish, one simple Extinguish, and these things are already clearing everything other than the tanks from that turn on. And then maybe 2 to 3 Extinguishes later, if they have multi-strike especially, then they're literally clearing tanks, clearing the entire floor. It's just stupid how strong these are. I would say I kind of prefer Silliphite just because it, you know, for those early hits where you might not kill the tanks, it'll allow some easy, like, pretty much any damage spell can clean up, because now it's like amplified. If you have multi-strikes, amplified by 3 even. So, yeah, but you're kind of splitting hairs. Both of them are gonna. I literally in my games of doing this strategy, I literally never lost a game if I had a DPS unit that was one of these sweepers. That's just how insanely good they were. And then Big Sludge, the main knock against Big Sludge, I would say, is that it costs 2 Ember and it takes up 3 pip space. You know, you don't have a whole lot of pip space to spare when you're trying to create these super floors, because keep in mind, Melting and Stygian, you know, they don't have any ascend or descend mechanics, so you don't have much leeway there. But that being said, Big Sludge is just one of the better units in the game in a general sense, right? If you're getting any amount of harvests, the quickness with which it scales damage is just stupid. And, you know, by the time the boss rolls around, you're doing like, you might be doing 500 damage. You might have multi-strike on it and you're doing 1,000 damage per hit. So yeah, Big Sludge, pretty good. And then Bounty Stalker. Bounty Stalker is nice because it's a little bit flexible. You know, you're typically building a super floor, but Bounty Stalker, you can add that unit. Usually Bounty Stalker is a weird one because it's like, it is a banner unit, but it kind of isn't one at the same time, because it usually gets offered in card rewards that are not banner units. So you're usually finding it after, in my experience, after you've already set up your DPS and tank unit. And if you have the sweepers, you probably don't need it. But if it's any of these other DPS units, you might consider adding Bounty Stalker and just stacking them up a little bit, and then you could potentially replace them with Bounty Stalker. The thing about Bounty Stalker though is, you know, he's flexible. You can stick him on any floor. The stealth means that you're gonna basically get that free hit in, and that could help with either finishing enemies off or preparing them to get finished off at the top, depending on if you're setting up at the top or bottom. And you know, the more he dies, the better. And usually the way you do that early game to mid game is you're going to play him not on your super floor, so you can guarantee he dies. Yeah, and that's Bounty Stalker. It just grows to ridiculous amounts of damage typically, even in a deck that you're maybe not reforming as much as a typical Melting Remnant deck. Reforming your banner units, at least. You're definitely reforming Little Fate a lot, but not your super floor. Your super floor units, you're typically just extending the burnout on. Well, and I hope I should clarify, you know, well, we'll get to all that later. So now in the decent tier, you're seeing some repeats from the tank, which shows that a few of them can be flexible that way, like Siren of the Sea. You know, the scaling is the same either way, so whatever you need her for, she'll be decent either way. So I do generally prefer her as a tank, just because I'm generally looking for the sweepers instead, you know, if we're talking Stygian banner units, and they're all uncommon, right? But, you know, both these Sirens are still going to be pretty good. Typically, I'm going to want to find multi-strike, though, as you are with almost any of these in the decent tier, and I guess any DPS is going to want multi-strike, but the sweepers need it less, I would say, just because they're clearing the whole floor out, and multi-strike almost just becomes kind of icing on the top of the cake, whereas with like the Sirens, you might need it to properly be able to clear out a floor. You might just need that extra hit to finish off the second tank or whatnot. But yeah, you know, Lady of the House, kind of talked about her before, just has decent stats either way, can be kind of a swing unit. Perfect Enforcer arguably could almost go to the great tier, I would say. You know, he's probably somewhere more in the middle here, but you know, I find him a little bit, you know, he's always going to be decent, but the times he becomes great is when you have those drafts. If you have drafts behind him, it's just so much damage. So I'd say if you have drafts, give Paraffin Enforcer an extra consideration, he's going to be pretty powerful with the drafts. And then Paraffin Thug, always a decent DPS unit. Never going to be your top tier one, but often one that you take early and you might just transition out of if you find like a bounty stalker later on or something like that. But until then, it's decent stats for early game. And the 20 gold from Slay is a ton of gold if you're properly triggering those slays. That's often enough to get you an extra reroll at some shop early on, which can be big, or just an extra purge on a trained steward or something. And then Wickless, I think similar to Siren, I typically would say he's better served as a tank, but has the scales damage as well. So if you need him for DPS and you don't have a DPS, Wickless can do just fine. And then we have the concept of like a utility unit, because typically, I'll get to this later, but I found like my gold standard upgrade path was usually I'd take 1 pip upgrade first and then a draw upgrade second. The 1 extra pip would allow you to have like one of these utility units, along with just having flexibility to kind of start on any floor that you wanted. But anyway, the top one was definitely Offering Monument. It's kind of hilarious and just super fun to play this unit in this combo. You're incanting so often, and the fact that you're every Extinguish you're adding at 5 max health back, so that's an extra incant, which if you end up losing the Offering Monument, you can just bring it back with Reform. And then you can also, if you have like a Subsounding Blade or an Intent on Death, you can bring it back, and then you can re-trigger the Extinguish on your whatever the champ. Why can't I remember the champ's name? Little Fade, and then it gets that extra 5 HP each time. So it's like, it's not like endless, but it's borderline endless. You saw it in one of those intro videos, just how flexible I could use that Offering Monument. If you want to check out my full videos, you'll see some pretty funny shenanigans there. But yeah, Offering Monument is great. Slap some extra health so you get a ton of incants. You can also flex it as like an additional tank in a way. It has that 40 health, so it's good. Drafts, drafts are just good. The only thing that sucks is since they're not a banner unit, they don't come in early, so I wouldn't rely on them as your only source of DPS. That can prove to hurt you in some consistencies, but and Sacrificial Res is really just another version of draft. It's a little bit more payment, but sometimes that payment is beneficial to you. I don't typically take Sacrificial Res against Seraph the Diligent, but if I see any other Seraph ahead of me, I think if I didn't have a draft already and didn't already have my utility slot filled, I would take Sacrificial Res. It allows you to bring a draft in with even higher stats, so the scaling's just already amped up. And then at the decent tier, and I could have put like, I debated putting like Entombed Explosive or the Molded Encasement, whatever the stealth giving one is, but I didn't find them to be quite on the level of these. You could use them, but I just found myself usually removing them because I didn't want them in they weren't good enough to risk like putting into the Reform pool. Lodestone Totem is interesting because I'm typically not going to take Ember upgrades, so it is tough at 3 Ember to justify Lodestone Totem because it's a banner unit and you're going to draw it in your opener, so often I just wasn't able to play Lodestone Totem unless I had some sort of artifact support. But that being said, Lodestone Totem is always going to be a good card for Stygian. If you do pick it, you may have to change up the game plan and add some Ember upgrades just to facilitate being able to play it along with like your tank or DPS on turn 1, because you don't want to have to cycle all the way back in to find these units. And even with Lodestone Totem, it's like if you're adding it, you kind of want it to use it. You don't want it just to be a dead opener draw that's like convoluting your banner unit consistency. So it's not an auto pick. I would say I skipped it actually more than I took it, but if you can justify taking it, it's hard to really, pass up Lodestone. Another thing to keep in mind is if you set too much, you're not going to be able to trigger the Extinguishes on your Little Fade. So there also is a little bit of nuance there, but it's pretty easy usually like to control your incants. Like if you really don't want to incant, you can just go to a different floor and play your spells. Usually your spells, a lot of them are just like Reform cards and stuff, so they're not stuff you have to really play on the floor if you don't want to. Remnant Host is the only tomb unit I listed just because I find it so much better than the other ones, particularly if you are going for that the Harvest synergy with Big Sludge or Wickless Baron. It's pretty hard to beat Remnant Host. It is a unit that most of the time you're not wanting to trigger Little Fade's stuff on it. You're probably putting it in front of Little Fade. And hopefully you can still, there's going to be, actually, well, I would say I'd still put it behind Little Fade, I guess. It really depends. You're really going to have to calculate like what the health is of each unit and try to do it accordingly, because you do want to trigger the Extinguish on both Little Fade and Remnant Host if you're going to have them as part of your game plan. So yeah, you just have to think like, do I need Remnant Host? If you do, take it. If not, you could still take a one of. It's a nice to have. You don't have to play it. It would convolute the pool. I wouldn't take it if you find yourself needing, if you're still stuck with random reform, maybe not. But if you got targeted reform by the time you see Remnant Host, which is, in my experience, pretty common, I think it's fine to add one of. It's just a nice flexible unit that doesn't cost anything to put down. You could put Endless on it to make sure it's not in your reform pool. Just a pretty good unit. And then Glacial Seal, similar to Lodestone Totem, the fact that it costs extra Ember kind of sucks, but it is at least not a banner unit, so it's not convoluting your banner unit drawing in terms of like drawing early. But it is still kind of awkward to play it a lot of the times because of the 2 Ember. Like, you have to usually sacrifice something to play it. But that being said, if you're liking AoE, or just liking damage in general, it can be an okay source of it. Like, it will, the frostbite that it applies, if I'm setting up at the bottom floor, I like it a little bit better, because the frostbite that it applies, it's basically ×3 damage, so it can really help clean things up. But I find it's just usually not needed. It's there if you need it, though. And then on the note of Burnout Extension, I touched on this before, but I should really reiterate, like, my typical, my older Melting Remnant strategies, Burnout Extension cards were typically secondary to Reform. And that's just not the case in this particular strategy. In this particular strategy, they're pretty equal. I'd almost say early game Extension wins against Reform. But you're gonna want to lock either one in. Like, I would still lock in like targeted Reform early if I can find it. But either way, like, Burnout Extension is how you're gonna win the game. You're not typically gonna be reforming any of your banner units. Your DPS unit, your tank. They really just want us. The thing that you're reforming is sometimes your utility units, but mostly just your Little Fade. And outside of that, you need just really good forms to keep that burnout extended, because 2 burnout per Extinguish is okay, but it's often not enough. You need something else to help things. So like Hallowed Drippings is pretty top tier in that regard. Doesn't cost anything, and it affects your whole floor, applies a whole 3 burnout, so just a really hard card to beat. Lady of the Reformed as well. If you have a Lady of the Reform, you're going to be good. Your units are not going to burn out. You pretty much have just locked in that, and you almost don't need any of these other things. But if there's no better options, even if you have Lady of the Reform, I'd still probably add some of these. They're just pretty useful things to have. And then these 2 artifacts in particular also round out the great tier. I mean, if your Extinguish is triggering twice, you're now getting 4 burnout per Extinguish, which you're probably not going to run out of burnout at that point. Plus your stats are also going to be better, so you don't need as much burnout because you're killing bosses faster. Combustible Wax, another one where in my old, in my classic Burnout Rector Reform strategy, I almost didn't like this artifact because I didn't want those extra burnouts applied. Because I just wanted to reform constantly, like all my units as much as possible. But in this strategy, since you just want your units, sticking around as long as possible, this alone you know, if you get 5 stacks from every Extinguish of Little Fade, you're definitely not running out of burnout in that fight. And then over here, still great, but not on the level of any of these. In the great tier is Wicklash. You know, comparing it to like Hollow Driplings, it costs 1, it only affects 1 unit, and it applies less burnout. But it does give you a little bit of scaling, which late game, this pretty much means nothing, the 5. There's, you know, it's kind of laughable compared to what you're getting from Little Fade, but early game it can be relevant. Can definitely help, probably save you between 10 to 20 pyre health, honestly, between those first 2 rings if you start with Wicklash, so still pretty good. And Purifying Cleanse, similar to Wicklash in that it only affects 1, only does 2 burnout, but that's still pretty good, and it does cost 0, which is nice, and it is the only thing in this entire kit, this entire combo, that you know, just restores health. So that's sometimes, especially early game, pretty good to like put on a Lady of the Reformed or something like that. And then Wax and Spike, I've always thought this card is underrated but not great. It's just an okay card that almost always can be added to a deck. It's not really like, even though it's like a rare, it is ironic because it's not really a late game type card. It's more of an early to mid game card. You know, for 0, usually I'm playing it for 0. I don't really care too much about the attack that it adds. It's just kind of nice to have. Like, sure, if I have extra Ember, I'll do that, but really I just care about the extra burnout it does. So it's basically a Hollow Drippings that is 1/3 as good, which turns out to still be a decent card. Just kind of shows how good Hollow Drippings is. So Wax and Spike's, you know, not a bad thing to include, really. If anything, you can consume it for free, right? That's always like a good utility card. It's not like resin removal, which sucks, but we'll get to that. Little Fade Extinguish Support. So you also, you know, early on it's easy enough to extinguish her because her health is low, but the more and more you reform her, the more and more her health is going to grow. And at a certain point, you know, and also her burnout is going to grow too. So given that you're only, without any other, you know, burnout support, you're looking at just 2 burnout per turn to your units, and that's not really going to be enough. So you really need to find ways to, especially if you didn't find any of that burnout extension, you need to find ways to kill your unit, basically, or otherwise support this and bring her back as much as possible. So that's kind of what everything here, the theme is. Like, Remnant Pack is actually unbeatable in this regard. Similar to how the sweeping units, when I found them, I literally never lost. I literally never lost when I found Remnant Pack. Usually you might have reformed your Little Fade once or twice by the time you draw it. But at that point, the health is still pretty low on Little Fade. And then if you can stick Remnant Pack on Little Fade, now it'll come back for free each turn because, you know, she's a champ, so she costs 0. But it'll never get that high amount of health that makes it, you know, last a few turns sometimes before extinguishing. So this pretty much just this guarantees you basically an extinguish per turn at minimum, even more if you can have like an intent on death or something. And then on that note, intent on death is also pretty good. You usually want to take it down to 1 energy, put on a holdover if possible. That'll just keep giving you those extra procs. You know, it will make it harder. She'll gain the health in that regard, and then it'll make it subsequently harder for her to die. But if you have it on a holdover, you don't really care because then you're getting an extinguish each turn. Pretty good card with Little Fade. It is interesting because it used to be 0 cost, and I didn't like it back then because really, you know, the extinguish effects on tombs are only kind of so-so to like spend an entire card on. But now that Little Fade has just such a powerful extinguish, this actually becomes a pretty good card. And then we already talked about Waxer Snuffer. I mean, and also, you know, I talked about burnout, but another, you know, huge thing with extinguish is, you know, the more you're extinguishing, the more stats you're getting, and that's really the main thing here too. You know, by 3rd tier or whatever, you're getting 30 damage per extinguish. So the more and more you can extinguish, just the higher those damage stats will be. And then Molded and Wicked Blaze are pretty similar. I would almost prefer molded just because it costs less. The plus 10 damage is pretty irrelevant, I would say. You're not really ever going to use Little Fade as a unit in this strategy that is there to attack. It's just kind of there to provide stats and burnout to your units, and then chump block a few hits. So in that regard, I do prefer molded a little bit, but it's kind of splitting hairs between the two. If you see either of them, you're taking them. So much better than random reform. It allows you the flexibility to play, some extra units, and not have to worry about like keeping a reform pool so clean. So now you can like do things like play a bounty stalker on other floors or a tomb unit, stuff like that, and not have to worry about it. And then in the decent tier, we got both primitive mold and sacred wicks. That's your random reform cards. They're still gonna be usually a bread and butter thing. As I said, you're usually dealing with random reform early on, and you're just gonna have to get used to dealing with it. And I will say that it is not out of the question. There were a few times where I didn't find molded or wicked blaze or anything really before my first boss, and I literally would hell vent primitive mold just to get that extra chance at reform. It is so important to be able to take on that first boss that you do have enough reform, and if you didn't get any, if you completely missed on the way to your first boss, it's not out of the question to either put a primitive mold on the holdover, permafrost it, or just simply hell vent one of them. Or even a sacred wicks would be better, but yeah, basically you need that reform. And then on this side, similar to Intent on Death, just having ways to kill your Little Fade is going to be pretty good too. Subsiming Blade is pretty hard to beat in that regard. It gives a nice flexibility of being able to kill enemies and your own units. I will say though, even a Subsiming Blade that's on holdover will probably have enough damage to always kill your Little Fade, but if it's not on holdover, which is common, I would say, you're going to prioritize putting a actual reform card on holdover before you would prioritize putting Subsiming Blade on holdover. If it's a non-holdover Subsiming Blade, you're probably only looking at between 20 to 30 damage, I'd say, on average for it. And in that case, it can't always kill your Little Fade. Like, Little Fade, especially in those late game battles, will grow to like above 30 health usually. And in that case, it can't really do the job. Same with Flash Freeze. Even to Flash Freeze, usually I'm putting Surge Stone on this card at some point, and in that case it does around 30 damage, and I can do it for like a one-time kill on my Little Fade, and it's pretty good for that. But and even early on it's 11 damage or so on your Little Fade, which can, at least I think it takes 2 reforms before that is outscaled. I don't know, it can be okay for that. And then for killing the minion waves, this is one of the biggest things I always love about having Stygian as either my primary or secondary, is just how easy of a time they have killing minion waves, like especially tanks. No other clan in the game has the ease with which Stygian has at doing this. So in the Great Tier, we have Ancient Synergy. Just like my sweepers, just like my Endless Tome, Ancient Synergy literally has no losses to its name in this strategy. If I have it, I literally never lost. It's just that good. It's insane how good Ancient Synergy is. Like, it just deletes units from the game, especially if there's any amount of spell damage. But even without it, like a typical Ancient Synergy for me could basically kill a Gilded Wing on its own, and then with spell weakness, it could literally kill 2 of them or 3 if that was a thing. But there's never going to be more than 2 Gilded Wings on a floor unless you did like Dripfall or something. And then Titan's Gratitude, similar. It's early to mid game, it'll delete units as long as it has any amount of spell damage. I should also mention, well, I'll get to some of that later though. I on a lot of these cards, Surge Stone is like just fine because you're scaling so fast with this strategy that by turn 4 to 5, your units are just naturally going to kill everything and you don't need spells anymore at that point. So Surge Stone is actually almost preferable to plus 10 damage in a lot of cases, just so you can get even more damage early on when you draw these spells and just clear out those early waves easier. But anyway, Titan's Gratitude, it's attuned, so like one simple Surge Stone on this brings it to 125 damage or whatever, which is just insane. You can even add another plus 10 damage on top of that to get to 175 damage. Turns out 175 damage for one Ember is pretty good. That almost kills a Gilded Wing. Certainly kills it with any amount of spell weakness. Ice Tornado is also pretty good. More early game than late game, but early game it's basically can do a pretty good job clearing out most waves. It's not going to, unless you have a Surge Stone on it, it's probably not going to clear the whole wave out, but it's going to get it down low enough that pretty much anything else can, like a unit or anything else, can finish it off. Ice Storm, now this is a card you obviously need to have plus 10 damage, or plus 10 to 20 damage on, because it's useless otherwise, but similar to Ancient Synergy, this card actually has no losses to my name, because every time I added it, I knew that a spell shop was around the corner. That's really your main reason to add Ice Storm is in that case. And you need to commit to putting damage on it if you no matter what it is, Surge Stone or whatnot. And then it's going to be a just really good card. It's pseudo AoE, but also just puts damage here and there on the tanks as well, while also clearing out the backliners. And then Subsiding Blade, this card is just really good. It's impaired. It's a pretty high priority Ember reduction upgrade. At 2 it's pretty awkward to play, but if just a simple 25 gold upgrade to bring it to 1 makes it a really good card. Try to get those first few procs, and then because if you wait too long to like late game to scale it, it's a little bit more awkward. But if you scale it early on, get it to like 15, 18 or like 18 damage or so, from then on out, you're pretty much killing every unit, and then you can kill your little Fade at will. Nice flexible thing. Any amount of spell weakness, you can also do like hundreds of damage with it. And then Titan's Tooth, it's always weird how good this card is, because it's like I don't know. I mean, it is an offering card, but otherwise you're playing it at 3 and like 5 damage. I mean, it's okay. It's just a lot of energy to spend, but it turns out we are doing the exiled version of Stygian, so you're going to have chances to get that offering pretty often, and to get 5 AoE damage along with 10 Frostbite for free is actually pretty insanely good. And at worst comes to worst, if you need to guarantee playing it, you can always just play it at 3, because I find generally a lot of my stuff is energy reduced down to 0 by the time I'm adding a Titan's Tooth to the deck. So just a really good card. It also had basically most of the cards you see here, I had very few losses to my name when I had them in my deck. And then at a decent tier, another offering card that's pretty good is Crypt Builder. Similar to Titan's Gratitude, you're going to want to stick some plus damage to really get the full value out of it. But once you do that, it's doing over 100 damage easily, closer to 200 if you really put stuff into it. Going to pretty much clear up any tank. Can get played for free quite often. Crushing Demise, it's still good. It's not a card you want to be playing on your super floor though, because you really don't want to kill your units if you can help it, because you're going to lose that burnout that you've spent so hard stacking. But it is nice, like let's say you set up at the bottom floor and you have like a sweeper, you'll clear out all the low health minions, and then if you can draw this on any of the next turns, you're guaranteed to just clean up one of those tanks pretty much for free. It's not too bad. I'd find that's the best situation for Crushing Demise. You could also, if you have like other AoE like Ice Storm or even Titan's Tooth, if you're set up at the top and you kill some of those units at the bottom, the AoE with one of the AoEs, you still can like play Crushing Demise on the middle floor or something like that to still kill a tank. And Fatal Melting, it's also just kind of in the AoE. It's a card that it feels overcosted, but if you can just get a Surge Stone or a plus 10 damage stone on it, whatever you call the plus 10 damage stone, it's at least something you can play early on, which is mainly when you'd want to play it anyway, and you don't have to rely on the friendly deaths in that case. And then if you just slap an energy upgrade on it, it becomes a lot less awkward. At that point, it's basically like any of your high value AoEs at that point, like a Glimmer or a Vent. It's just a low cost thing that will clear out all AoE. And it's pretty good in that case. Oh. And then Helical Crystals, ever since the Attuned upgrade, it's been kind of outshined by Titan's Gratitude and Crypt Builder in terms of like basic cards that slam that front line, but it's still a great card. It wants to have energy reduction, really. It's definitely a high priority. Similar to Subsuming Blade, it's pretty high priority to get that energy reduction. And then it can also benefit pretty decently from plus damage since it does double dip. Any amount of spell weakness can make it's more of an early game card, but if you have spell weakness, it can still be relevant late game. Or if you have this card, Gifts for a Guard, which, as I said, it's not too bad to consume all your cards and add a ton of magic power, since later on you almost don't even need spells. You can just, as long as you can bring back Little Fade consistently, that's all you need at that point, because your units are just going to be so scaled with damage that you don't need any damage spells at that point. And then Flash Freeze, it's I keep loving this card more and more. Like, definitely not a late game card, but early game it takes out all the backline pretty easily. It's a little flexible in killing your Little Fade, and it's great against the early game bosses. The 8 Frostbite's pretty legit. Just a nice card to have. You're never too sad to see Flash Freeze, I feel. And then we got utility spells. Frenzied Swarm is insane. Even beyond this strategy I'm going over today, and I've done a lot of my analysis of my data recently, and Frenzied Swarm comes up as one of just this insanely winning card, like in a sense of, like, if it's in my deck, the effect of my win rate is just insanely good. Like, I have like a 90%, it's like between 80 to 90% win rate with Frenzied Swarm. And conceptually it kind of makes sense. It completely nullifies the damage. Not only does it nullify the damage for every unit on that floor, it stops them from doing any sort of resolve, or it's basically like a one-time silence at that point too. It's if they're gonna shuffle status into your deck or something like that, it stops that. If they're gonna play Ember Drain, anything like that, it basically just stops that. And then on top of just that, if there's like Dark Wings or whatever, like stuff that does a ton of damage, it basically nullifies that as well. And then if you have any amount of offering, it triggers all of the offering in your hand. So pretty hard to beat Frenzied Swarm. An offering token also is just a very winning card. You're not taking it when you don't need it, but when you need it, it's just such an amazingly good card. You're obviously taking it when you have offering around. But being able to choose the offering card is just so valuable. And then, the fact that it draws allows you to basically replace itself. There's not many cards in the game that draw the turn you play them, and this is one of them. So that alone already kind of sets it apart from a lot of other cards in the game. It costs nothing, and any card that costs nothing is always going to be okay in a deck that has Incant. In my experience, I typically had some form of Incant, even if it was just the armor Incant upgrade on a unit, on my tank or something. But in the better scenario, it would be like any of the Sirens or something like that. And at any rate, incanting with any of these, all of these zero costs kind of work nice with Incant. And then Urchin Spines and Unnamed Tome. I talked about resin removal earlier, and how I much prefer something like Unnamed Tome as a utility spell, because it, if I compare it to resin removal, which is not in this list, right? I don't like resin removal. Unnamed Tome, it costs 0, so it's already better than resin removal in that regard. It consumes itself, already better than resin removal in that regard too, because it's like, usually you just need it for a one-time thing, and you want to play it and then not draw back into it. And then, other than that, it permafrosts itself on top of that. So, a utility card you really want to have around when you need it, and, well, what better way to do that than to just have it permafrosted by default? And then even on top of that, if I'm directly comparing it to resin removal, I would say Silence to me in my experience, is a lot more useful than debuff removal / buff removal of enemies. Yeah, so Unnamed Tome, really good, great utility spell. You're never sad to have at least one of these in your deck, especially if you see Seraph the Patient or Seraph the Chaste in your future, I think, or even Seraph the Diligent. Basically, anybody but Sap Seraph, you're pretty happy to see this against. And then Urchin Spines, unlike something like Energy Siphon, I think Energy Siphon's pretty trash, but Urchin Spines, on the other hand, is really good. Apply, for the same energy cost, it applies double the spell weakness to the entire floor, and then it also just consumes itself. Just a really good card. Very winning card. It's going to allow you to combo with any of those previous cards to clear out an entire floor, most likely. And then the decent tier, I would almost say decent / situational. I probably should have said that, but Deep Offering is a very good card when it is something that makes sense to add to your deck. Like I said, there's not many cards in the game that draw the turn that you play them, and this one draws 5 of them. So if you have some reasons to take Deep Offering, I would say, are if you have the artifact that gives you energy when you discard, it's definitely worth it then. If you have Offering Monument, I think it's pretty worth it as well. If you have any amount of offering targets, Titan's Tooth, whatnot, it's also a pretty good add. And that's really the reasons I would add it. I wouldn't just add it to add it, but if you have any of those situations met, go ahead with Deep Offering. Oh, and goddammit, Engulfed in Smoke. This is a card that's like just good in a general sense, but I find I didn't necessarily need it that much. One thing, you definitely don't want to play it when you have your little Fade already on the board, because obviously you want her to get hit so that she gets extinguished. But if you can afford to play it on all your units, and then put little Fade on after, it becomes pretty good. It's especially good against Seraph the Patient and Seraph the Chaste. Seraph the Chaste, it's going to prevent Ember Drain. Seraph the Patient, it's just going to prevent some of the stupid amounts of damage, because you could always reform your tank against Patient, but you're going to lose that burnout, and you might need that burnout, so it's always something to consider, having options there. And then Drain, I would say the main thing with Drain is if you have offering targets, similar to Deep Offering, it's a pretty good add. Just gives you more ways to do that. And then otherwise, if I see Seraph the Chaste in my future, I think Drain's pretty good. You play it once on a Pyre Wings, and then you're never going to get Ember Drained from that Pyre Wings. And it also cycles back into the deck, so you can keep using it. So Drain, a little bit more, I'd say the most specific out of all these, but when the situation's there, it's pretty good. And Preserve, this one's just kind of going to be always good. It's it's a 0 cost, so it's great with Incant. It permafrosts itself, so if you don't really need to play it that turn, you don't have to do it. You can just keep it, and then eventually you might have a card that you want to permafrost that you couldn't spend a permafrost upgrade on. And never too bad just to have one of these in your deck. I'm rarely just going to skip a Preserve straight up. I might pick other cards over it, but if I don't have a Preserve, I might usually take it. I think it's not too bad to include in your deck. It's almost draw neutral in a way, because true, it might slightly delay you getting to another card, but it also, I think the fact that it basically, you can just keep it in your deck and then it doesn't redraw, or you can even use it on like a deadweight, and then that deadweight will never redraw into the deck. Just kind of always good to have Preserve, I feel. And then artifacts, there's a few pretty good artifacts here. We've talked about Combustible Wax and Waxer Snuffer, so nothing really more we need to go over there. But Fade's First Blade, as we've said, you're going to be extending Burnout, so these units are just going to be constantly in Burnout, and they're also not being reformed, so they're not going to lose their Rage. And 3 stacks of Rage, pretty good. That's, your whole floor is getting basically 6 damage a turn. If if you already didn't have insane enough damage scaling, this just makes it even more insane. Especially early game, it's just hilariously powerful. And then Split Anvil. This one is really good because there's so many 2 to 3 cost cards between these two clans. Ice Storm, Ancient Synergy, Helical Crystallis, even other cards that I typically don't like Memento Mori and stuff like that. If I split Avil, I'll probably add a Memento Mori just because it's basically a free way to make everything in your hand 0. And then Exploding Candle, little Fade. It's going to be dying almost every turn. She's going to have Burnout almost every turn, and that's basically free AoE. You don't even have to add any AoE to your deck at that point. And then Votive Key almost made the great tier, but it can get a little screwy depending on your situation. It's really good in that you can basically just keep playing Little Fade first, and then she's endless. And in that regard, I mean, it's pretty good. As I've said, that Endless Tome is one of the best cards you can add for this strategy. But the thing with Votive Key is you get into trouble those turns where if for some reason you couldn't have Little Fade die, and then now you need to play another unit, it can get a little wacky with the Endless. Also, if you early on, if you start with Votive Key, it's not going to be an issue because you have it and you build around it. But the thing is, like, late on, it can be weird. Like, let's say I have a banner unit that I like a bounty stalker or something, and I had added a +1 burnout upgrade to it. Well, now I have to be really careful that I don't accidentally put Endless on that unit, because if I do, it's going to really screw with my flow. So that's kind of the thing with Votive Key, but it's borderline in the great tier as well, I'd say. And then Cuddlebeard, I mean, if you're always going to have those, since we're doing the exiled version of Stygian, it's always going to be decent just on that alone. But if you happen to have, Titan Sentry or Cold Kalia, anything like that, is even better. Titan's Tooth. In those cases, it's kind of stupid how powerful Cuddlebeard can be. Flicker's Liquor. This is basically free energy. I mean, you're always at least putting a little fade down each turn. You might be putting some tomb units down. No matter what, it basically just allows you to make this. I probably should have put Flicker's Liquor over in Great, but I don't know. It might not be quite on the power level of these. Memorial Fun. This one's more of like, is it early game? Then it's great. Is it late game? Eh. If it's late game, eh. But early game, that's a lot of gold. Founding Seal, pretty straightforward. If you do end up with Incant, it's going to be insane. If you don't, it's going to be useless. Then Totem Fragment. If you find yourself needing that finish off with the spells, it's going to be pretty good. I think particularly if you set up at the top floor, this is really good, because then you're probably going to get some damage spells by the time that first wave gets up there, yet you're probably not going to be scaled since Little Fade may not have even died yet. In that case, having that initial spell weakness boost to that top floor is going to be pretty legit. And then quick notes on the upgrade path and positioning. So early game is going to be a shit show. As you saw in some of those videos I showed, it's like you're just kind of playing wherever it might make sense given what you're given. Basically, you're starting out with weird stuff, probably just train stewards, and maybe you got a draft or something, but you don't really know where you're just gonna have to look at the enemies, whatever enemy group you end up getting, and position accordingly. But by mid and end game, then your game plan should be coming together. And usually I find you have a preference. You're either going to want to go top or bottom floor. Rarely will you go mid floor. The only time I would go mid floor is if, like, I had the pip reduction on top or bottom and I don't have the pip space to actually play on that desired floor. That's probably the only time I'm going middle floor. But anyway, like bottom floor, the advantage of bottom floor is that Little Fade dies earlier. If you have Icy Siliphyte or things that apply spell damage, you can then finish them off easier above, or Frostbite as well. Also, and even if you have a top floor, like a group that works better on the top floor, sometimes you'll also go to the bottom floor on certain fights when they have those Scourge Shufflers, so the units that shuffle Scourges in your deck, just so you can try to kill those things without having them just screw everything up. I find if I have sweepers, I tend to really go to that bottom to try to kill the Scourge units. But otherwise, if you have some spells that can kill the Scourge units, you'll be fine at the top floor. Top floor is a little bit more consistent, I find, just because you have extra time to find your cards. That might be banner units, that might be things that, like reform cards on holdover, stuff like that. And it might just allow you to hurt the units before they get to you, and then maybe you have some harvest. I find like harvest really likes to be at the top typically. But anyway, that's kind of the deal there. My typical upgrade path, I would say, was usually pip into energy. That was kind of the bread and butter. And depending on what happens, you can change that up. But I'd say a good 75 to 80% of the time, it was just pip into draw. The pip, the nice thing. So you gotta figure your typical tank and DPS, both of them together is going to be 4 pip space, and then you're going to need a 5th pip space to put down Little Fade. So right there, it's already 5 pip, which is the starting pip. And then if you get pip reduced on the floor that you want to play on, that's now down to 4. So you literally can't play on that floor. The thing that the pip upgrade does for you is, along with just allowing sometimes to get that extra utility unit in, even without the utility unit, it does allow you the flexibility to go to that desired floor and set up there. A lot of times it's pretty imperative that you do get the desired floor. Getting on the floor that your build needs is very imperative to making this strategy work. So pip first is usually what you're looking at there. And then second, I usually don't need a pip beyond that. It was typically not worth it to me to add more pip just to get like an extra utility unit or something. Usually I just wanted to draw upgrades so that I could get to my cards faster. Ember was definitely the least that I would take, because I find it's so easy to just make spells cost less from upgrades. The 25 gold upgrade that's always at any shop and on every reroll. I just don't find Ember upgrades that necessary. The only reason I would add them would be if I had like a Lodestone Totem or something where I can't reduce the cost of the unit and it's like a high cost unit. Even like Big Sludge, maybe I might consider Ember, but definitely pip. With Big Sludge, you definitely want pip first, and then it's probably a consideration between draw and Ember second. So what do we want at Merchant of Steel? Well, for tanks, obviously you just want health. And also this incant armor is pretty good too. It will end up scaling past the 25 in most cases. It just doesn't have the initial 25 if that's like something you need, but usually you don't. You're usually blocking anywhere from a medium to high damage hit with your Little Fade being in front. And then that gives you time to survive with your tank and just start incanting armor, because you're playing a lot of spells per turn, really. And then also, if you do have pip space to spare, which I usually didn't, but sometimes I would, if you do, Large Stone is a consideration as well. Hard to ignore 40 health. That's pretty good. The 15 damage is largely irrelevant, I would say, but it might be relevant. At any rate, if you have the pip space to do it. If not, I would say Large Stone I'd keep away from. It could kind of hurt your super floor strategy. I would much rather prefer 25 health or incant armor to the Large Stone for my tanks. And then for DPS, usual story, multi-strike's going to be the best. Nothing's going to beat multi-strike. But just a simple plus 10 damage could be okay. That'll be, it's nothing compared to what the damage you're going to get from a Little Fade, but keep in mind a lot of the time you're just trying to deal with that the first few waves and mitigate the amount of pyre health damage you're taking, because that's often what's going to lose your game. You're not going to have a problem with bosses usually with this strategy, honestly, and you're not going to have a problem with late game waves. It's just those early game waves. If you don't have good spells to kill them with, you might want anything you can get to just kind of spike that. So like, especially like Sweeper Unit would really like to see the 10 damage right off the bat. That way you can just play it turn 1 and you're killing all backline units without any extinguishes needed or anything like that. But anyway, and then quick is an interesting one. I'd say it's generally good. Like it's almost if it's on a sweeper. So if it's not a sweeper, I wouldn't take quick probably. But if it is a sweeper, quick can, especially if you see like Patience Seraph or Temperament Seraph in your future, that represents a lot of health saved on your tank typically. And it's almost like adding like maybe 3 or 4 upgrades of Heartstone to your tank, just with the amount of damage it's going to save you. But you do want to be wary that, as we've seen with those videos, it's like come the later waves when you've triggered a lot of extinguishes on Little Fade, you will literally kill tanks in one hit with your sweepers. So if you're killing the entire floor with quick, then you're not triggering the extinguishes on your Little Fade from having her get hit. So that is something to keep in mind, and something to consider. I would say in my experience, I didn't put quick that often on my sweepers. It really was just if I saw Patience or Sap Seraph in my future, that's when I would consider quick. And then drafts, you don't have to be very picky with. Any one of these basic upgrades is going to be great on a draft, especially when you consider that your drafts are not banner units, so you might be drawing them later, and they won't be scaled quite as well as like your proper DPS units. So if you can add any little extra bit of damage or even extra bit of survivability, if you're dealing with like spikes or sweepers, it's going to be good to stick those on it. I wouldn't put like 25 health or anything on it. I mean, I guess if it's like one of the later Merchants of Steels and you didn't get anything better, sure, put it on, but these are probably what I would target. Even multi-strike could be okay on a draft. And then Endless is just for the tomb units, I would say. You could stick it on a unit too, I guess, if it makes sense, but I don't typically want to plan on having to like fight the boss on multiple floors. So I'm usually just not going to put it on my banner units. I'd rather put it on my tomb units. It keeps them out of the random reform pool, so you can put this on something like a Remnant Host and safely play it. It won't gain health as long as you put it in the front. It will gain health if you proc a little fade to it, but at any rate, it's not in the reform pool. It gives you a ton of harvest energy, so it can be good there. But I would say it's not like a high priority upgrade. I'd only do it if I had gold to spare. And then Offering Monument loves to see extra health, basically. Worst comes to worst, you could also do Battlestone, but really try to get that extra health. I would almost put it on the Offering Monument before my tanks even, just because of how much extra draw it's giving you. That just the amount of gas, Offering Monument, it represents just a ton of gas. Like I can draw through my whole deck a few times over if I have 2 plus 25 health upgrades on it. And then Merchant of Magic, as with most of my play style, usually revolves around knowing how to properly use Merchant of Magic. You really just get a lot better at the game when you know what's good on what, especially with which strategy. So if there were one slide here I would recommend people commit to memory, it would be this one. But anyway, Holdover. So I would say these 3 here are going to be the highest value holdover targets: Intent on Death, Molded, and Wicked Blaze. Intent on Death, basically what these do is it facilitates your ability to get those stats and burnout extensions each turn. If you get them Molded, if you get them Wicked Blaze, you really early on need to look for holdover on those. At least one of them. You only need it on one of them, really. And then primitive mold, I've done it. I've definitely put holdover in primitive mold before that first boss. If I find holdover and I don't have any better card, primitive mold is like an okay target. It's weird to do it on like a basic card, but the importance of having Little Fade come back every turn is just something that cannot be overstated, right? So primitive mold, it's not out of the question to put holdover on it. And then to a lesser extent, Subsiding Blade. Subsiding Blade is a pretty good holdover target. It's doing, take it down to 1 energy, put holdover on it, and you're able to kill your Little Fade almost every turn. As I said, once it gets to like 30 health, it can be iffy, but at any rate, you don't have to always play it on Little Fade. You can use it to kill enemies as well. And then Ancient Synergy is an interesting one. There's a few runs that I found just putting it down to 2 energy and putting on a holdover was actually pretty legit. That was allowing me to basically clear out all the tanks on those early few waves, and then if I didn't need it anymore, I just simply wouldn't play it, and then it would go back into the pool, and it kind of did its job already at that point. So it's not out of the question if you don't have better holdover targets to put it on Ancient Synergy. You got to keep in mind holdovers. It sucks not to put holdover on something. Sometimes you just have to, but if you see holdover come up and you can afford to do it, if anything makes sense to put holdover on, you should do it, just because it's, in my opinion, by far the most powerful upgrade in the game is the spell version of holdover. And then Emberstone is probably my second, I would say, most powerful upgrade in the game, because it's always there. It's always 25 gold. It's there on every reroll. It's on every shop, and it's just so useful. You see a lot of the holdover targets also have an Emberstone target, especially like the 2 costs and 3 costs, because if you're on holdover, you don't want it to be taking up a lot of Ember per turn. So it is pretty imperative if you put something on holdover to reduce the cost of it. So Intent of Death down to 1, Subsuming down to 1, Wicked down to 1, Ancient down to 2. Ice Tornado you're not putting on holdover probably, but I do like to at least get it down to 2, ideally 1. It depends. I'll either take it down to 2 and like add a Surge Stone, or just take it down to 1 and have it be like a decent damage for 1 Ember. Fatal Melting you want down to 1, and then probably a plus damage. Same with Helical, and then Molded. Molded should probably be like right next to Wicked Blaze, but it down to 0. Molded's great. You literally don't spend anything to play it. You can be Ember Drained, it doesn't matter. And then Double Stack, I didn't really find myself using Double Stack that much, only if I had extra gold to spare, really. Like, it does technically give pretty good boost to these 2 cards, Siren Song and Engulfed in Smoke. It's Dazed 3, nothing, at that point, nothing's gonna survive your Siren Song. And then Engulfed in Smoke, I feel like it's a little bit win more to double stack it, but 4 stealth for 1 card play, even if it's 3 energy, probably going to take it back down to 2 with Emberstone if you are pouring double stack into it. But either way, 4 stealth, probably no boss in the game is going to kill you at that point. But I just find they're not going to kill you anyway, so it's like, do I really need to double stack Engulfed in Smoke? Probably not. But if you got the gold, why not, right? And now I put Power Stone and Surge Stone together, because there's really not too much reason to differentiate between the two, and especially in this strategy, I would say, because like I said, you're scaling come waves 4 and beyond is such that your units are killing everything anyway, so why not just put Surge Stone on anything, even if it is like something you might typically like to see cycled back into your deck. In this strategy, I just don't think it's that necessary. Like, if you play Ice Storm once, it did its job. If you play Titan's Gratitude once, it did its job. And you'll see with a lot of these, it's like Ice Storm obviously is useless without the damage, so it's the highest priority. Titan's Gratitude, 25 is not super great to the front unit for 1, but put any of these on it, now it's doing like 100 damage, right? And 100 or above. And that's pretty good for 1 energy. Same with Crypt Builder. It's like, okay, if you're heavy on offering, it can be okay without an upgrade, but why not just upgrade it? Why not make it do over 100 damage? And then Fatal Melting, you're just adding that damage so that it actually does something early on before, you you would need your little fade to die 4 times before it can kill like a purifier, right? But if you just add one of these, then it just kills it right off the bat. Why not do that, right? And then Helical Crystals, same thing. Surge Stone makes it still relevant late game. Ice Tornado, same story. Flash Freeze, that allows you to, 3 damage, come mid to late game. It's, if you put on a backliner, they're still going to hit you, and then they'll die after the Frostbite. But if you add like the magic power, then it will kill the backliner before it can still hit you. And also then it gives that flexibility to sometimes kill your little fade if you need it. And then for Permafrost, you're going to see a lot of the same. I would say for Permafrost, it's the upgrade, of the expensive upgrades. It's the one other than Holdover that I do like to see. And honestly, if you can't find Holdover on a lot of these targets, Permafrost becomes an okay substitute in general. But anyway, like some targets especially like to see Permafrost, like Remnant Pack. You can guarantee just having it in hand so that you can play it on Little Fade, and not like sometimes, like if it's not permafrosted, there could come a turn where you didn't reform Little Fade or something, and then you just have to wait for it to cycle all the way back through the deck. But if you permafrost it, that situation is no longer possible. You're guaranteed to be able to play it on Little Fade at whatever turn it's available to do so, and then from that point on out, pretty much game over. Because you're getting an Extinguish every single turn, and that will scale pretty quick. And then Molded Wicked Blaze, you'd definitely prefer Holdover, but it's just fine to put Permafrost on it as well. That way, if like you draw it and you didn't need to use it that turn, it's now there for a later turn, and you can just play it as needed. Same with even Primitive Mold. Like I pretty often I'm permafrosting a Primitive Mold early on if I need to. Offering targets are also pretty good permafrost targets. That way, if you missed on the offering, it's there for when you're always going to have those the Forgone powers to try to hit them, and then anything else, like you might have a Drain, you might have Offering Token, you might have other stuff. In those cases, it's just really nice to have these on permafrost, so that you're always guaranteeing that if you miss on the current turn, probably the next turn, and definitely odds are in your favor, at least by the turn after that you'll be able to play it for free. And then similar to these double stack targets, being able to play Engulfed in Smoke or Siren Song the exact turn that you need to play it is pretty powerful, and makes those cards, which are already decent cards, become even better cards. But yeah, and in general, you can always just put anything on permafrost really, and it will be it's never bad to put anything on permafrost. And then the different versions of Seraph. So I will say this strategy crushes Seraph. I don't know, I lost to Seraph maybe a few times, but really it's rare. Like you're not really scared against any version of Seraph, I would say. But anyway, like Seraph the Chaste, the buff and debuff is irrelevant, I would say. There are some times that you have Rage as part of your kit, but that would only be probably Paraffin Thug or Paraffin Enforcer and Big Sludge. Both of them are regenerating Rage in every turn, and I would say that the scaling that Little Fade provides really doesn't care about you getting those stacks removed every turn. Really isn't too big of a deal. The only thing you really need to care about with Seraph the Chaste is the Pyro Wings, the Ember Drain. And there's a lot of ways to deal with that. Ancient Synergy is just going to kill the unit straight up, because it's always in the front, remember? And it has, like 150 health. Usually most Ancient Synergies by the end game are going to be able to deal that. Frenzied Swarm would simply just daze the unit, so it's not going to attack you. Engulfed in Smoke will make you stealth, drain, sap it so it can't hurt you. And then also the Silence will make it so the Ember Drain just doesn't apply. And if all else fails, if you missed on all of that, you can always just simply make your spells cost 0, and then you really don't care about Ember Drain either. And then against Seraph the Diligent, Not much to say here other than, you know, try to have some options to kill Purifier. It's not the end of the world if you don't, because again, you're probably just going to scale out so well that having a bunch of missed draws probably doesn't hurt you too bad. But at any rate, you know, beyond just being able to kill the Purifier, the only other thing you have to deal with really is the consumption of your cards. There's always this artifact which basically hard counters this version. But, you know, just have some low cost cards and just have a lot of them. You know, you can add some of those utility cards. Like you might add an extra unnamed tome or something. Then it's like permafrosted and 0 cost for the turn that you need it. And then you could just use it basically as consumption fodder. Primitive molds can be great targets to keep around as consumption fodder because you probably have better spells than primitive mold by then. Generally just play it as long as you keep in mind and don't mess up like consuming like a card that you actually need. You should be fine. At any rate, you could always Hellvent that card too. There's always guaranteed to be a Hellvent right before Seraph. Take that Hellvent route. Hellvent your most important card. You know, if it's a spell, then you can afford to lose one of them. And you know, if you make that mistake, or if it just needs to happen for whatever reason, if you had to play it first, you'll have another one on the backup that won't like break your game plan. And then Patient and Temperament, they're pretty similar. You know, Temperament, in my opinion, it's just an objectively easier version of Patient. It's like the same game plan, but just less things to deal with. Basically, the thing is they're going to have a lot of incoming damage in the waves. So any form of AoE is going to be great there. If you can kill those Shade Wings before they attack you, that's ideal. So, you know, sweeper units with Quick is good, but like Titan's Tooth is fine. Frenzied Swarm can be fine. You know, even like a Fatal Melting is fine. And then against Patient, there's a few extra things you'll have to keep in mind. Like Unnamed Tome is really good against him because it stops all of that extra rally and incant stats that you'd be getting. You know, especially considering you're on a super floor, you might be proccing a lot of that, especially because you have to bring Little Fade back in each turn. You have to play a lot of spells that, you know, if you have to kill Shade Wings and stuff, you have to play a few spells at least on that floor. But, you know, as hard as Patient is, not too bad here. Even if you do end up losing like your tank, you probably have enough reform to bring it back and have it not be too big of an issue. Just loses a few stacks of Burnout, but if it's like Lady of the Reformed, you don't care at that point. She'll come back with already a decent amount of Burnout and just keep stacking Burnout. So yeah, that's pretty much the deal there with Seraphs. They're not... If you're having trouble with Seraph, I don't know, I'd have to take a look at how you play, because I really didn't have problems with Seraph at all with this build. I mean, when you scale that insanely, it's just pretty hard to die to Seraph. And just to finish things off, we got a few winning deck examples here. So here I would say is a pretty bread and butter, like top tier example build. You'll notice like I got this really good artifact, the double Extinguish one. For my units, you know, my main group here is I have a double health increased Lady of the Reform. I have a Silliphite with Quick on it because I'm facing Seraph the Temperament. Draft is my utility unit. I also had a Bounty Stalker that I probably didn't need, but it was there if I, you know, it wouldn't be on my main floor, but he would be like kind of going around different floors, just hitting things here and there. Same with the Remnant Host. And then kept all the Foregone Powers. That's not always the case, but in this case it was. Hallowed Drippings, we talked about that. One of the better extension cards. Offering Token, so, you know, I had Titan's Tooth and a Crypt Builder. Looks like that's probably the reason I kept all the Foregone Powers and took an Offering Token. Frenzied Swarm, you know, along with having offerings, just Seraph the Temperament. It's just going to be good against that. And then I had 2 Moldeds on Holdover. I don't know why. I think that was probably just a weird Hellvent that I did at some point, but like probably not that needed. I mean, you should only really need 1 Molded or Wicked Blaze on a Holdover just for your Little Fade. I think in this case I was probably doing it for Bounty Stalker. but that's pretty, I would say it's rare for me to have 2 moldeds on holdover. Primitive mold, kept all them. That's also not always the case, but yeah, maybe I just didn't get around to removing things in this one. Intent on Death, I had 2 of them. You know, I'd rather had an Intent on Death on holdover, but I'm guessing I did this Hellvent early on because I see I permafrosted an Intent on Death. That's probably just because I couldn't find holdover. In this one, I even did like 2 Ember upgrades. I would never do that unless it's like the final. I must have went to the final magic shop and just, I didn't find holdover, so I put anything extra I could find on these things. Ancient Synergy was on holdover. Like I said, it's not bad to put an Ember and a holdover on that. That's just going to help so much with all the waves at any stage of the game. And then we got Crypt Builder. Mortal Entrapment, I don't know what was going on there. I probably started with this card and just never got around to removing it. I would say Mortal Entrapment, I don't think it's a very good card, but I'll even remove it a lot of the times. But in this case, I guess it just wasn't on my priority to remove. And then Titan's Tooth is just good. And the Vengeful Shard, it looks like just came from this artifact. And then you can also see I have the standard, like, start with a pip upgrade into a draw upgrade. And in this one, since the deck was so powerful, I was able to take on all of the trials. I will say that's not too common. I should have maybe even dedicated a slide to this, but I will say this combo, I would say, needs to skip trials quite often, and I think you'll see that with some of my other examples here. Yeah, like so this next example, I skipped 3 of them, and I believe I remember this one particularly. It was like it was like pretty clutch that I did skip this, because it was like, if it's like Heaven's Seal and stuff, I'd say Heaven's Seal is usually worth skipping, even though you are building a super floor. Having like an early Gilded Wing or even like Clip Guardian come through at full health is pretty devastating, and if 2 of them get by, you're probably dead. Heaven's Seal's just kind of broken. But anyway, so on this one we have 2 drafts. This was, I guess, I think I showed this in the intro. Oh no, not this one. But anyway, I got 2 drafts, and in this case, you know, I only have enough pip space for one of them to be along with the units. And they got the same upgrades, so I believe I had hellvented just one of them. And the reason I would have hellvented the draft is just to, since they're not a banner unit, to try to get to it earlier. I think I remember this run, and I basically just was a little frustrated that I wasn't finding draft quick enough early on. Late game, it probably doesn't matter as much, but early on, I just wasn't finding it fast enough. So I just said, screw it, I'll hellvent it, so that I literally doubled the chance that I draw it early. And then I got Lady of the Reformed again with the standard double health upgrade. I wouldn't say it's standard. I mean, you could easily put the armor on. That's as good. And then Icy Silliphite. No special upgrades here other than just Battlestone and the armor incant. Looks like she was almost just providing extra tankiness for the drafts. You know, and that happens. You want to be a little flexible. So it looks like I had Energy Siphons here. Must not got around to removing those useless cards. But apparently I had removed Foregone Power before Energy Siphon. That's kind of interesting. But I got 2 Halla Drippings, so pretty good Burnout Extension, especially with Lady of the Reformed. Frenzied Swarm, probably just good to have. I have it, and then Molded. Interesting that I don't have it like any upgrades on it. I must have found it later, or, well, I guess I got these 2 remnant packs. Yeah, so I probably found these remnant packs somewhat early on, and if that's the case, there's not really too much of a reason to like do much with Molded, because Molded becomes pretty, you're only using it up until the point you find remnant pack, and then past that point you're really just not using your reform at that point. But yeah, remnant pack's pretty good tier. Titan's Gratitude, pretty good frontline damage. Fatal Melting for some AoE, probably just took that to try to kill those purifiers. Engulfed in Smoke, who knows why I had that. Probably it doesn't look like I really need it in this deck. And then Umbra Stone would have been nice with Silliphite. Probably got that for some I had to have gotten it for some cavern event. But yeah, if you weren't aware of the trample on a sweeper unit, it just sort of like, if you kill a backline unit that has a low health, all of that trample ends up reapplying to like the tanks in the front line. So it actually, in a way, makes it multi-strike, at least as far as the waves are concerned. Then yeah, Diligent. Maybe I kept this siphons just because it was Seraph the Diligent, and I realized I needed a few zero cost like fodder spells. I could see that being the case, but it looks like I'd countered it anyway with the consumption relic here, or artifact, and this one as well. So I'm pretty set up to fight the Diligent with both these artifacts. And we got the standard pip first, draw second again. And then another example here. So we got Lady of the House in this case as the tank. So we got the armor and the health, kind of standard tank upgrades. We got Offering Monument in this case with double health, pretty standard to see on that, and then as our utility unit. And then we got Siren of the Sea as our DPS. So Siren of the Sea, not a tank in this case, just having some extra damage and then multi-strike. Trained Steward, apparently was gonna purge it at some point. That's I believe the purge icon, the whatever that cavern event is, but I guess I just never got around to playing it. And then Hallowed Drippings, pretty standard, amazing card. Preserve, just a decent card. Urchinstein's, great utility. We got Flash Freezes. It looks like I Surge Stoned both of them, probably just to help killing my own unit at a certain point. Because I don't have the Endless Tome here. I just have, in this case, I just have 2 Moldeds, and then the Wicked Blaze. Wait, Wicked Blaze. What am I saying here? Wicked Blaze, right? I always get Wicklash and Wicked Blaze. I always get like mixed around. So I think between 2 Moldeds and 2 Wicked Blaze, I don't really need to put either of them on holdover. Is probably what happened there. Because you can see I put it on. Ancient Synergy is typically a card you're getting mid to late game. You're not really getting it early game. Or you're not getting offered it early game, I should say. So the fact that I put holdover on there, I'm pretty sure I would have had the Moldeds or Wicked Blaze by that point, and just said, screw it, I'll just put it on Ancient Synergy, because clearly I'm able to, between Primitive Molds, all these Reform cards, you don't really need Reform at that point. And then, yeah, Deep Offering, as I said, it's great with Offering Monument, pretty good combo there, and then add in the fact that I have 3 offering targets here. Yeah, pretty much inclined to take Deep Offering at that point. And yeah, pretty much this deck. As you can see, again, I didn't take on all of the trials. Most likely these were most likely if I skip them, it's Heaven's Seal, Balanced Seal. And then a final bit of data here is just showing some data that I gleaned here. So particularly I looked at the 22 most recent runs, just because I felt that was the good example of me actually following this strategy. I went 16-6 during that time, so you can win pretty consistently using this strategy. Everything else here you can take with a grain of salt, but I think it shows a little bit of just support for everything I'm saying here. So like you'll see, and the way I count this is just if the unit was in the run or not. So like if I had 2 drafts in a run and that run ended in a win, I would just count it as 1 here in like the win column. But anyway, so in 8 wins I had a draft, and 4 losses I had a draft. So basically how you read that. So you can see some units have pretty good, even though it's a small sample size, like there's at least some evidence here of units being pretty good. Like Lady of the Reform, like I said, is such a good tank. And it's hard to deny 7 wins and 2 losses. Maybe if I play 100 games that looks different, but until then I'm just going to say I'd need evidence I would need more evidence to actually say that it's not a good unit, because right now it seems like it's a pretty good unit, right? Same goes for a lot of these others, like the sweeper units, Icy Silophyte and Cold Kelia. Like I said, literally no losses to the name, 7 wins to the name using them. Yeah, and everything else, it gets so low that probably not worth teasing out much else there. But and then I also just looked at like my upgrade order just to see how that looked, and as you can see, almost every time I went pip into draw, so 10 wins there, and then Some losses too. You can see if I started Pip, I was probably going to go into Pip draw. So 3 losses there, and then Pip draw, 2 losses, and then just none means I died before the first boss once. Which happens. I mean, the early game, as I said, is kind of a shit show. But if you know what you're doing, you can usually win. I mean, I only lost once before then, so this kind of shows that as long as you can figure your shit out, you'll do it fine. And then draw is my favorite to go, actually, if I can somehow make that work. But as I said, usually your banner units, both of them are going to take up 4 pip space, and then you need that extra pip space for little fade. So, you usually can't justify going draw, but if you can, it's nice not to have to spend an upgrade on Pip and just get draw. And then just kind of the other ones were probably specific to whatever run was going on. And then as far as spells are concerned, a few things that stand out to me here. Hallowed Drippings was 10 and 1. That's really good. Wicked Blaze 10 and 3. Molded 7 and 2. I mean, Wicked Blaze and Molded are really accomplishing the same things. Frenzied Swarm 9 and 1. Like I said, Frenzied Swarm in not just this build, but any build I could look at, and Frenzied Swarm has these type of stats. It's crazy how good this card is. Remnant Pack 8 and 0. That's the Endless Tome. Remnant Pack is. Yeah, pretty hard to deny that. Titan's Gratitude 8 and 2. Even Crypt Boulder at 8 and 4 is pretty good. Purifying Cleanse 7 and 1. Any of the so Hallowed Drippings, Purifying Cleanse. Wicklash. Where's Wicklash? 3 and 2. It's just any sort of Burnout Extension is going to be decent. And then Ancient Synergy, Titans 2, 7, 2. But Ancient Synergy 7 and 0, like I said, another card that just I didn't lose with, won a lot with. I mean, I don't know. I just don't see how Ancient Synergy isn't one of the best cards in the game. There's nothing special about this deck that makes Ancient Synergy good, right? Ancient Synergy is just always going to be good. Just like Frenzied Swarm, they're just always going to be good because it's just a good card in general. And then, Subsiding Blade is also always good. Typically, Flash Freeze perform pretty well. Unnamed Tome, obviously a pretty good swing card here, or utility card, whatever you want to call it. Offering Token 5 and 0, Sacred Wicks 4 and 0. That's an interesting one. Kind of, I wouldn't say that it's on the level of a lot of these other, but obviously there's variance at this low of a sample size. Ice Storm 4 and 0, Wax and Spike 3 and 0. Yeah, that's pretty much going to do it though. Hopefully this helps. Like I said, this strategy only applies to the Firelight version of Little Fade, because the other Little Fade has very specific things that she's going to do depending on the path you go. And I also find that all of her paths don't really work well with one another. Like, you don't want to put Endless on her and have her gain energy while also having like the other ones which kind of want her to be reformed a lot. So yeah, at any rate, maybe I'll do another Little Fade strategy on the other ones once I figure them out a bit more. I will say, when I was doing these, this run data is only limited to when I had the version we're doing the guide on. If I had the data from the other ones, it would look much worse. Like, I had definitely a losing record with the other versions. They just didn't seem very powerful to me, but that could just be because I'm doing them suboptimally, or I'm playing them suboptimally. Most likely I am, because I think I've seen other people, at least with Little Icarus, have had pretty good success. Personally, I have found no success with that version, but clearly I'm missing something there. It could just be this, particularly the Stygian combo is not good for her. Like, I could see her being pretty good with Awoken, like if I did Awoken. But anyway, that's going to do it. Hopefully that helps you out. Let me know in the comments if you have any agreements, disagreements, or if this ends up helping you out. Until next time.